For those of you who are at the last meeting, I have now officially clarified what the difference is between our two budget advisory committee meetings, and happy that I was able to be here on time for this one. If you weren't here last time, we have two budget advisory committees that have very similar names, and last time we had a meeting, it was on the same date as the other budget advisory committee. And I got an email saying that one was canceled. So I just assumed it was this one. And I ended up showing about 7 minutes late to that meeting. So I apologize and thank you for bearing with me. I want to do a quick round of introductions. We're not going to have time to talk about like your deepest, darkest secrets or what your favorite color is or what you did last summer. But just say your name and sort of like your relationship to the committee. So if you're a board member or if you're a parent or if you're a teacher or if you're a director, whatever it is. I'll say your name and then you can just turn on your video if you don't mind and introduce yourself. If you don't have access to video today, then just start talking, because with Google, it's different from Zoom. We really only have 9 blocks. It's kind of like the Brady Bunch. So we only will see you if you talk and have your camera on. So I'm Eric, I'm the superintendent. It's nice to see everybody. Anjanette, you wanna go next?
Sure. Hi, my name is Anjanette Pelletier. I am a Fremont community member and I currently work for School Services of California. And I know Eric from San Mateo County, where we were longtime educators there.
Yes. All right. BATF meet, whoever that is. You want to say hello?
That's probably me, since I'm running the meeting. Sorry. This is Patty Sandoval. I work for the Superintendent and Board of Trustees here at Fremont Unified, and I serve as a secretary for this meeting.
Excellent. Chong Pin, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I am a parent representative. I have 2 kids going to Chadbourne. I've been kind of calling in to kind of listen into the finance side of things and just an observer for the most part.
Great, terrific. Fran
English, Director of Special Education, and I'm sitting in for Steve Musto today.
Ganesh.
Hi, Ganesh. I'm a parent and community member from the Irvington area. I've been attending the Budget Advisory Task Force for the last year.
Perfect. James Arcala.
Hey everyone, James Arcala, Director of Budget, also a longtime friend of Anjanette. Hello, Anjanette.
Kathleen.
City citizen of Fremont. I've been on, I think, 2 or 3 other school board committees. I'm also on the Fremont Library Advisory Board, and I'm very interested in the whole LMT issue.
All right, Luis. No, Luis. Micah.
Hi, my name is Micah. I'm a parent in the Irvington area. This is my first meeting.
All right. There's somebody that says PD.
Hi, this is Prakash Dasot. I'm a parent and community member in Irvington area.
Terrific. Ryan.
Hi, Ryan Shiba, parent from Azaveda and also alumni of Azaveda.
Terrific. Before I call on the next person, Patty, board member Jones is texting me. She has the wrong link and evidently 3 other people do too. Can you connect with her and try to solve that? All right, next, Sharmila.
Hi, this is Sharmila Balasubramanian. I'm the budget manager for Fremont Unified School District. I support Mr. Arcala in budget operations for the district. Thank you.
All right, Victoria.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm a community member, parent. I went through Fremont schools myself, kindergarten through graduating from Washington, had a son do the same, and now I have a first grader in the Spanish immersion at Blake House.
Wonderful, welcome. Yajing.
Good afternoon, Yajing Zhang, board president, and welcome to the meeting.
Perfect, and Zamil.
Hey everyone, I'm Jamil. I'm currently a student under FUSD and I'm one of the at-large members. I know Eric through a set of emails, but it's nice to meet you, and I'm excited to see what we can do.
Wonderful, terrific. Is there anybody I didn't call on? Looks like some people with earlier alphabet names logged on. Arnav, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Arnav. I am a current sophomore at American High School, and I'm on this committee on behalf of Surfboardy.
Terrific. Anybody else we missed? All right. Well, we have 2 agenda items today, but it will be a full agenda, and at the same time, we will be a full agenda, and at the same time, we have a hard stop at 5 o'clock, and so I want to be cognizant about time. I would imagine that most of you are probably most interested in talking about the first agenda item, so we'll start with that. And if for some reason we don't get to the second agenda item, so be it. Patty, if you want to go ahead, or actually I could probably just share my screen and then I can drive at the same time. I'm going to share our, share that. You guys don't need to see all of my notes. All right. Hopefully either as a staff member or as a community member, well, the community members wouldn't have gotten a direct email about this, but it's linked. If you're a community member and you're not a parent in the district, you will have access to this through the agenda. So you can just click on the link, but I'm also sharing it via the presentation. And so I'm happy to drive for this conversation, but you have access to it. It's also available on our website. And if you're a staff member or a parent, you received it in an email yesterday. What this is it is the balanced budget initial scenarios. And so I want to be real clear about what this is and what it isn't. First of all, these are not a list of cut recommendations, and they are not a list of decisions that the board has made in regards to reductions. The scenarios are based on looking at where the district spends its money across the board and identifying where we might be able to find 10 to 20% of savings in each of those departmental areas, each of those program areas, and each of those staffing areas. Now, it's really important to remember that 85% of the different district's budget is staffing. So in order for us to realize $34 million in reductions, we're really looking at staffing reductions. And so I don't want to candy coat it or anything like that and just sort of say like, hey, we can get through this, through like, decreasing the amount of copies we make and cutting like a PD day or something like that. Victoria, I see your question. I'm not planning on going through each slide. So basically, let me provide the context, and then I'm just going to open it up to questions in general, and so you can ask your questions. So I just kind of want to orient you to the deck. This is a 106-page deck. I'm not even going to be presenting every slide at the board meeting, let alone in this budget advisory committee. But basically what I want you to see is, and bear with me for just a second. Basically what I want you to see, hold on, I'm trying to find how I can, I can. I'm trying to figure out how to advance it and see you guys at the same time. There I go. Okay, so I just want to kind of go through the introductory slides very quickly. I will go into them more in depth at the board meeting, but it's really important that everybody reads the deck in its entirety because there are things, it goes from really bad to not as bad as the sections go through. And there is a lot of creativity and hope, but you start with what would just be a straight cut to a whole lot of other scenarios that might ease the pain a little bit more for the district. Also want to acknowledge that our goal is $34.3 million, and we need to do that by the end of this year. And that is determined by a $25 million structural deficit in our unrestricted ongoing funds and about a between $9 and $10 million ending of one-time funds, which if those costs were to be put back in the general budget due to the ending of one-time funds, they would total $34.3 million. Now remember, budgets and actuals are two different things. Budgets are based on assumptions. Those assumptions don't always come exactly as we thought they would. This number is as accurate to October 16th, but on December 18th, we'll have even more accurate numbers. And the reason December 18th is because that's when we do our first interim. We have a little bit of a timeline here on our unrestricted and restricted ending fund balances. The reason is because there's a lot of misunderstanding about, having over $100 million in ending fund balance. And while it's true that particularly during the 22-23 and 23-24, or during the 22-23 school year, we had a rather large ending fund balance. A good portion of that was a function of having restricted funds being held in 21-22 and 22-23 that were intended to be spent over a 2 to 3 year period of time. But also whatever cushion we had in our reserves on the unrestricted side has been spent this year, and that's because we have a structural deficit of about $25 million. Just reminding everybody that we are a pretty lean organization as we compare to other districts in the county. We've stayed pretty steady. We haven't sort of ballooned our staff as some people might think, or as some districts may have. And in fact, in the certificated area, we actually have gotten smaller than we were on a per student basis, but than we were before COVID. In classified, we're a little bit higher, but as you can see, compared to districts in our county, we are in the bottom quartile of adding on staff. Some people are curious about staffing breakdown. As a reminder, 85% of our budget is staff. How that breaks down when you're just looking at unrestricted is about 10% in management, about 13% in classified, and about 56% of expenditures in certificated on salary, and about 21% on benefits for all three of those groups. If you combine both the restricted and unrestricted, it balances out a little differently. And the reason you see such an increase in classified is because a lot of our restricted staffing related to facilities is paid for out of facility funds. So those would be Fund 40, which is facility rental. There's another fund that's like facility sales. And then of course we have Measure E, and now we will have Measure M. Our options we have two options. One, we could do nothing. And if we do nothing, the bottom line is that we will be taken over by the state and we will be deemed insolvent by 26-27. An example of a district that was taken over by the state is Inglewood School District in Southern California. And that may ring a bell to you because one of our former superintendents, Jim Morris, is currently the state trustee for the District of Inglewood, appointed there because they became insolvent and the state has taken them over. Superintendent is fired. The board loses all its power. San Francisco and Oakland have flirted with this in recent years. I think they're hoping to stay out of that, but it's not unheard of, and we certainly don't want to get anywhere close to that. The other option is we collaboratively work to balance the budget. We've created this plan and timeline, which hopefully you all have seen several times, but if not, it's included in this deck. So we're hoping to maintain local control and not have the county and the state come in and tell us how to spend our money. So we're hoping to work together with all of our groups to come together and figure out how we're going to do this. Again, these are considerations. They are not recommendations. These scenarios are considerations. They are not decisions. Again, it's looking across the board, 10 to 20%, how we might find savings in these areas. The scenarios were informed by 410 entries into our budget input portal for individuals and 125 community conversation forums. We had staff meetings, PTO, PTA meetings, school site council meetings. We met one-on-one with every director and principal in the district. I had executive board meetings with FUTA, CSEA, SEIU, FSMA, FEF, and FCPTA, and we've done a ton of budget analysis, comparables in our county and state, and then looking at industry standards. This is just consideration when framing these scenarios. Again, 10 to 20% across the board. We looked at where we might be able to find some of that savings in every sort of corner that we could. You may notice there are some areas that we didn't consider. One example is child nutrition services. The reason is because child nutrition services is self-funding, and every single person and every single expense is in a separate budget and separate fund only related to CNS. We have taken a multi-prong approach to scenario planning. The deck is divided into 6 sections. The first is just straight reduction and elimination. The second is redefining core. So we've gotten a little bit away from really clear definitions of how sites and programs will be staffed in our district. And I would like, as the new leader of Fremont, to return to either former ones or new ones that are ensuring equity across the board and making sure that that we are all operating under the same guidelines, but also that some savings could be realized. The next is funding reassignment. So that's where we take something that's either in the general fund or in our case in the LCAP, which is restricted, but it's has a lot more capacity to pay for things than some other restricted programs. And so we have a few slides in there about how we might be able to fund certain things from more restrictive programs that that don't get cut and that aren't part of the general fund or part of the LCAP. Why we would want to open up space into the LCAP is because it may be the best place for us to try to save some of the other programming that is in the general fund that is proposed to be cut. The next section is program structure and redesign. How could we do things differently, better, more efficiently, and potentially receive some savings or realize some savings from it. Section 5 is reprioritization of remaining one-time funds. So that's where we do have a little bit of one-time funds left, and the staff is reflecting what those priorities sort of came out to be from the input and sort of suggesting a way that the board might use those one-time funds reprioritized to kind of get us through a 2-year period of time where we could actually get to another parcel tax election and hopefully save some of those programs and maybe even bring on some more programs that that had to be reduced. And section 6 is just acknowledging that there are revenue possibilities out there that we need to consider, and that as a significantly underfunded district in the state, we'd like to take a page out of the books of other districts that have found ways to sort of generate new levers or increase levers of funding. That's something that I have particular experience with, having been in the second most parcel taxed community in the state, and having done a lot of money on the philanthropic side as well. So those are the 6 sections of the deck. Each slide has a rating system. It is a totally subjective, not objective, totally subjective to basically the cabinet and the budget team who's putting this together, sort of how close to the student experience these are. If it's green, it doesn't mean, yeah, go ahead and cut. And if it's red, it doesn't say, don't touch it. It's just, we need to prepare for the impact that it may have on the student experience. Each slide is organized like this, except for the revenues, potential revenue slides. Those are just straight content, basically. And so we've given sort of an outline of how the slide is structured. And then we go into each section and we define each section and what we mean by each section. And then we literally go through each and every one of these slides has a different part of the budget. We think we've done a an admirable, but probably not perfect job of reflecting what the actual was in 22-23 and 23-24, and then what the budget is for 24-25 for that particular area. But we fully expect that maybe this is not exact, but it does give you our best effort going into this. While each slide is simple in its readability, it really reflects a lot of hard work and a lot of calculation. I've got so many binders here. I've got this binder, and this binder full of SACS reports and full of all kinds of analysis that each one of these slides, represents. So it's deceptive in its simplicity, but we really wanted to make it a readable, approachable document for the public. So with that, I'm going to pause there. That was the overview. And we really just want to take some time to see if you've had a chance to kind of look it over, what questions are popping up for you. I want to be really cognizant of getting to everybody's voice here. So if you get to ask one question, we ask that you pause to ask your next question until somebody else has been able to get a question. And I'm going to keep the deck up in case you have a specific question about a certain slide, and then I can go straight to that slide. But I can, as long as you have your video on, I should be able to see you in my little section of pictures next to the deck so that I can interact with you on a more personal level if at all possible. So I'm going to go ahead and open it up for questions. James, did you have anything that you wanted to add?
Not at this time.
All right, so let's go ahead and take questions. You can either raise your hand, your virtual hand, and I can call on you, or if you're on the screen and you just want to start asking, feel free. All right, Rocio, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Superintendent. And I don't know if it's too soon to ask, but I was wondering if you have the opportunity to talk to FEF and see if you have some ideas about what we talk when you give us the opportunity to meet with you about the budget and see what is the great plans that I can wait to hear and elaborate. So, but I think I'm looking for solutions. I know it's going to be bad enough, but I think we got the measure. So let's see what we can do before the parcel tax. So I don't know.
Yes.
I read the deck and I see that you kind of implicate that you have some plans. So I was wondering you can share something.
As far as FEF is concerned, I will say I don't have plans, but I have lots of good ideas that I would love to share with FEF. I have already let Kathy know and have been at FEF meetings where I've sort of like begun to address the idea. And I'm not trying to be coy. The most important thing for everyone to remember is FEF is its own organization, and I don't get to sort of dictate what FEF does or what their goal is or what have you. However, we have a great working relationship, and I do think that there is an opportunity here for us to broaden the scope and the impact of FEF. And I can't wait to get busy and get working with them. I think that they are also eager for that conversation. And Kathy has told me that she's excited to get the group together to begin having those conversations. We've even discussed going and visiting some other districts throughout the Bay Area that have larger foundations, meeting with their executive directors and their elected presidents, and really trying to get a sense of what all is out there. I do think that they were very keenly focused on getting their run up and going and done, which they did in November, and getting supporting Measure M to get passed, which thank you everybody who is on this call. I don't know that I've seen many of you since Election Day. We're very, very excited and appreciative of the community's trust. We reached over 64% approval rating, which is huge. It's way bigger than any of us anticipated. And I'm just really excited for that sort of vote of confidence. And I'm looking forward to sitting down with FEF after the first of the year and beginning to plan out how we might broaden the capacity of FEF to start raising money towards supporting general fund priorities. And I have some ideas of what is sort of attractive for fundraising that we can partner with and make a long-term commitment that this will be a focus of a future, what I would call annual campaign in support of sort of bridging closing the finance gap.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much.
Great. Zamil, I think you had your hand up next.
Yeah, I did. I had a question. So in terms of the teacher reductions, the administrative reductions, the special ed reductions, and campus supervisors reduction in general, how much are we really like willing to go down or up in schools? Because I know within schools itself, high schools, right? I believe it's 33-1. If we can hire to 35-1, this can actually provide an advantage, toward the higher performing schools. They require less attention already because they're a little bit, ahead. And the lower performing test scores, we can actually provide more attention to them. So by actually hiring the students within, higher performing, we can prioritize that within the smaller schools and we can cut costs in general. Is that something we're willing to do? Like hire by 2 students, 3 students? Because I know within elementary, it's also very small. And another point here, within like administrative stuff, within enrolling students, like attendance, is there a way that we can do like online enrollment or digitize this to make this a more seamless process that we're paying for subscriptions rather than a salary? And then also in terms of special ed, here another point, sorry to keep going with this, but is there a way that we can pay for like training or something more in depth for special ed teachers? That way we can appoint 1 towards 7 rather than what we have, which is 1 to 5. I think this can benefit us in a way that we are providing higher quality of education rather than, just more for more people, just general people. And that was my point. Sorry about that.
Yeah. All of those are really good questions, but there's a lot there and there's a lot to unpack and a lot of layers. So I'll just say broadly speaking, yes, we are looking at how we can achieve efficiency through better training, through finding ways to, when possible, modernize situations, although in a unionized environment, we have to be somewhat careful of that. I will say, however, that nothing replaces a really great teacher. Teachers are research time and time again shows that a high quality, well-trained and well-supported teacher is most impactful on every measure of learning and wellness and everything. And we are not going to be in the business of replacing teachers. Now, where there are with any kind of sort of if we put kids on a screen or, whatever, not that that's what you're suggesting, but I would say in our organization, that's one area where at least as far as I'm concerned, we should never compromise. As far as functions are concerned, we're always looking for ways to improve administrivia, right? And you brought up enrollment tier. We actually do use a modern enrollment technology. One of our biggest challenges is that we have a very diverse community with a lot of enrollment needs that require a person to look at because we're getting transcripts and information in languages that aren't English from countries and systems that are not American. And it creates a little bit more of a sort of personal touch responsibility, but that is in the deck, and we are looking at enrollment modernization if it's even possible here. The challenge with reducing or moving things could always be that wherever you're moving it to would have to increase in order to take on that added burden. And so whatever we do, we want to make sure we're saving money with it. As far as your question about class size, we actually, our class sizes are I would say at the elementary level especially, our class sizes are big. And at the secondary level, they're sizable, but I think we can do a better job of strategically master scheduling our schedules to make sure that classes that are specifically designed for EL students have fewer students in them than, let's say, AP Calculus, right? And so there are things that we can do, yes. Whether or not we're going to achieve a ton of savings by doing that, I don't know. But I do think that there are ways that we can slightly, although we are pretty tight as it is, but there are some slight economies of scale where we can tighten, I think, a little bit at the secondary and elementary level, and try to save as much new FTE as we can, especially as we are in these really tight budget times. But all your suggestions and ideas are well taken. And I do want to clarify that this particular meeting on November 20th isn't about specific cuts. It's about, does anybody have any clarification about the scenarios? And is our data correct? Are there any clarifications about the data that we're providing? And are there any additional scenarios that the board would like us to add? The board won't be discussing the prioritization or debating like what they would choose over other things until December 2nd, which is when that debate will start. So just letting you know that.
Well, I appreciate the clarification. Thank you.
Okay. Yep. Yajing, I think you were next, and then Ryan, I think you're after that.
Yeah, Eric, I think you just have answered my question, because this one is just for the public to know whether there is any scenario missing or there is any suggestions. And then we're going to do the work on December the 2nd.
That's what
And okay, so I really like the structure, and some are immediate, simple solutions. Some are long-term restructure. I think that the staff and you lead the team has done a great job on that. And also it's so transparent that the community really knows what's going on with the district. It's very clear from a different angle and different aspects of the finance. And
Great.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. All right, Ryan, and then Arnav, you're on deck.
Hi, I wanted to double down. Thank you again for doing this, and a lot of work. And I think that was very clear. I read it from cover to cover last night. I was wondering, were there anything that you wished made it or didn't make the cut for the deck that may still be considered? A couple of things just off the top of my head were like deferred capital projects or golden handshakes, scenarios that didn't make it in here, because clearly the intent was to leave no stone unturned.
Right. So, I don't think so. I think, and actually it relates to, because when you were talking, I was like, I wonder, what would that be if there was anything? And if there was, why I wouldn't put it on there. And I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but maybe there is something that we miss. As far as deferred capital projects, so in the state of California, there are two very distinct lines, and that line in between what monies you can use towards facilities versus what monies you can use towards everything else is very clearly delineated. And oftentimes, much to the frustration of people like me who are like, gosh, I would really love to be able to use this money for something that I prioritized differently, but the state makes it very clear that you cannot do that. And so one of the things that we have done is that we have found a way to move a few more positions into the two areas that are most, like the line is very clearly defined. One is, in child nutrition services. So a lot of people in the budget input said, it's great that we're feeding every kid, but do we really need to do that? A lot of kids can afford to bring their own lunch. And the reality is we can't. The state has determined that this is a program that it's going to provide, and it can only be used for food, and the district can't touch it for anything else. And so there are some areas like with a few of our drivers. So we have drivers that take food around, but they also move furniture. So we've moved a little bit more of their FTE over to CNS. We're also looking at, we have principals who aren't out supervising on the yard during lunch because they're helping elementary schools open milk cartons or asking middle school kids if they have their ID to scan it. Those are all things that a CNS worker can do. And so we're looking to get principals back out onto the yard and get this new position. It's all in the deck so you can see it. So it's more sort of creative thinking that way. As far as golden handshake is concerned, it's a really great question. So for those of you who aren't familiar with what a golden handshake is, a golden handshake is basically saying in a unionized system where people who have more experience due to step and column, which is just an internal way of saying as you get more experience, you get more money in addition to the raise that everybody gets. That basically you invite people who are high on the salary schedule and thus a more expensive burden, although nobody is a burden, but you know what I mean, a financial burden. You invite them to retire maybe a year early and you give them some money incentive to be able to do that. Now, the challenge in the state of California is that now schools are, I believe, required, James, correct me if I'm wrong, to provide one-to-one years of service credit. So there really isn't the same incentive that there used to be 10 years ago. And there is this very sweet spot with golden handshakes where it becomes financially a benefit and then very quickly becomes more expensive to do a golden handshake than less expensive. And that was true 10 years ago. And so really with the new laws, golden handshakes are really honestly going to be a thing of the past because nobody really saves money because you aren't guaranteed finding a teacher with no experience to replace a teacher with 25 years experience.
Thanks for that.
Yep. All right. Arnav, you're next, and Anjanette, you're on deck.
Hey, I had two questions. So one was, why are like elementary school libraries gonna have? I see that in library staffing reductions, it says elementaries could have anywhere from half to 1 LMT, but high schools would each and middle schools would each have 1. So why is there a prioritization on elementaries over middle and high school?
It's a great question. The first answer is they're actually not different. They're just different slides. There is a slide about reducing the high school and the middle school, and there is a slide about elementary. And then in the creative area, there's one very specifically related to elementaries, and that's probably what you're speaking about. There's two reasons for it. First of all, is the funding source. So LMTs have, for the last very many years, hasn't always been this way, but for the last very many years, the LMTs have been funded through Measure I. And Measure I is the parcel tax that is expiring at the end of this year. The certificated librarians, which are at the high school, have never been funded out of Measure I, and I believe the middle school LMTs have also never been funded out of Measure I. So that's the first reason. The second reason is because of that funding breakdown, right? The amount of money that is required to bring the elementary LMTs into the general fund is far greater than just the amount of money that would be keeping the LMTs from the middle school as they always have been. And so really it's a question about if this funding is being lost, then we either need to lose the staffing or we need to find space within the general fund budget to be able to do that. So it's mainly, it all comes down to where they were funded in the first place. The other sort of little nuance is at the middle and high school level, librarians are funded simply by site. So it doesn't matter how big the middle school is, they get 1 FTE. Whereas at the elementary school, traditionally, it was funded based on a formula that we have not adhered to. And so the formula becomes the way in which we might be able to find some savings. And that is different at the middle school, high school, and elementary school. Okay, Anjanette, you're up, and Victoria, you're on deck.
Great, thank you. I'm sure there's no surprise that I would like to ask a couple questions about special education.
Sure.
That is my area of expertise. And I really appreciate that you've looked at both class size staffing and caseload staffing, and that you're comparing to industry standard. But I would like to just find out, I know you have smart people there, but how much of your effort so far has been in looking at workload of those staff versus just the numbers of ratios and caseload. So that's part one. And part two is about the green checkbox in the special education paraeducator staffing ratio, which I'm a big fan of because that has a huge amount of potential savings for you and also could help you grow the capacity of your own people. So I am also really interested in, have you considered that as you make adjustments to paraeducator staffing ratios, that growing class sizes at the same time might be really challenging and that you may have to stagger those class size after you build the capacity of your paraeducator cohort and move away from those contractors.
Yes. Anjanette, can you tell me what slide you're looking at real quick?
Sorry, 53, 54, 55.
Sorry, I don't mean to make you guys dizzy. Just close your eyes for a second.
You didn't talk about these in any detail, but I'm very interested in this topic.
Okay. So I thought you said, when you said a green checkbox, I thought you meant that we clicked the green checkbox on far from the student. And I was like, that shouldn't be, but I don't think that's what you meant.
Paraeducator staffing ratio on slide 55.
55.
And it is checked on the green far from student, but actually I agree with you.
Oh.
Because this is assuming that your internal team is telling you that if your internal people that you hire as employees who want to work for you and love working for you and you love having work for you, if you grow their skills instead of agency staff, that is actually an improvement for your students. So I agree, this could be really a great area, but
and that was the purpose of the green stats check in here. But when you articulated it to me, I got really scared because I was like, oh wait, did we actually mess that one up? No. Yes, the idea is that there's actually a benefit to the student. It's better for the student in a sense if they have well-trained FUSD staff rather than but really this green box could be read either way. So I appreciate that. In answer to your workload question, I will say this. We have a lot of work to do in special education and we're doing the work. I wouldn't say that we are at the point of having the conversation about how caseload and class size are also translated to workload, but I definitely agree that it's a conversation that we want to be able to get to at a point not too distant in the future.
I look forward to seeing the results of the FICMAT study, and I hope that they tell you some great things about your students, and thank you for this presentation.
Absolutely, thank you. All right, Victoria, you're up, and Michelle, you're on deck.
Thank you. First, thank you for noting that slide that says you actually have right-sized the student-teacher ratio even through the 6 years of declining enrollment. So you've been making adjustments as needed. So we don't need mass adjustments with anything there and kind of.
To your point, Victoria, being somewhat of an outsider, like I can claim sort of rookie status for the first year, right? I'm really impressed with how well our teachers, how supportive our teachers have been in just trying to adjust and move with the changing landscape of sort of pre-COVID, during COVID, and post-COVID. And as I look at our class sizes, we really don't have much room. We have a little bit of room, but it's very nuanced, and I would not recommend the board do much more than what is sort of scenarioed out here in the deck.
Thank you. So my question actually has to do with the line items that are coded for declining enrollment. And knowing that even though we're looking for these ongoing funds, that seeing that you've budgeted for the line item this year is $17 million in declining enrollment. And then for the upcoming years, there's a line item for $44 million. That as we adopt a multi-year budget, it is 3 years, right? Submitted to the county. So if we cost that out, I guess I have two questions. If we cost that out, first of all, say we budgeted 45 million, really that's 15 million ongoing for the 3 years. So why wouldn't we eliminate that? And second of all, I'm wondering if we're double counting, because showing that we're going to have excess through declining enrollment, how do we code that when we spend it, right? Wouldn't it just show that we're overspending in actual line items within the budget? Do we not think that those are accurate projections? And then in that sense, isn't it just another type of reserve?
I'll let James answer the second point. I'm not sure that I'm totally clear on the second half of your question, but I think even if I was clear, it'd probably be more helpful for James to answer because he's the head of the budget department. But I want to answer your first question, which I think is mostly about ending fund reserves. Is that right? Ending fund balances and reserve levels. So I honestly have not had an opportunity to engage this particular board, and I say this particular board because I've been a superintendent in the past and had lots of conversations with my previous board about it. But just being new and with everything that we've had to do, I honestly haven't had much opportunity to talk with our board here in Fremont about their philosophy about ending fund reserves and our ending fund balances and reserve levels. What I know is that we need to have a 3% reserve per board policy. And anybody who knows Ed Code might say, but the state law only says 2%. That is true. 2% is the state law. 1% is the add-on that's here locally. My understanding is because I'm not a finance guy, my understanding is a little bit more limited, but there are a couple of things. First of all, it is you get ending fund balance out of your unrestricted reserves, but I believe it's based on your whole budget, not just your unrestricted reserves. James, you can clarify that for me. And the reason is because even one-time funds, even restricted budgets are people, they're salaries. And so it needs to be 3% of your overall. The other thing is that I don't believe that they don't, when you apply compounding impacts, it's not just like a straight 3% of your unrestricted budget, and that's what you just move over year to year. It sort of grows over time. But beyond that, what I want to say is that short of having a conversation with this board about what their philosophy is about ending reserve balances and board or reserve levels, that in a district like ours that is significantly underfunded and is state funded, I think it's really, really important to be as transparent as possible about the ending fund reserves and acknowledging that when money does shake out, that we need to continue as best as possible to decrease the amount of money that's shaking out and thus increasing the reserves any given year, such that we can give that money on an ongoing basis to our bargaining partners. I believe in that. I've always believed in that. And I believe that it's just a good business sense. I think the challenge over the last 4 to 5 years has been that there's been a lot of money that is unknown, that is being held, that is expected to be held by the district, but spent over time. And that I am committed to working with our business department, with our board, and with our bargaining partners to have collective confidence in both our budgeting procedures and in how much money is actually necessary to carry over from year to year to maintain that 3% requirement. Now, I'm saying all that as an individual person. I have not had a chance to talk to the board collectively about this, but I want you to know that I'm aware that it's a concern and that I'm committed to working together with our partners to making sure that there's a little bit more collective confidence that there isn't money being hidden or that we're, trying to sort of play flat, fast, and loose with the numbers, because that doesn't benefit anybody, I don't believe, because at the end of the day, it's all going to shake out. And I'd rather it shake out and be given to our partners than have it shake out at the end. So I understand it's a concern and I'm committed to help solve it. James, did you want to try to take a stab at her second part of her question?
I wasn't super clear, but then I think an overall overview of the ending fund balance and then the 2 years, subsequent years, and how it all shakes out might be helpful for everyone. So just like for simple math, I'm just going to round everything. So ultimately, by the end of this fiscal year, our ending fund balance should be about $30 million. Next year, we're deficit spending by $20 million. So then that 30, we're going to subtract 20, and then we'll have $10 million left by 25, 26. And then the next year, we're deficit spending again by another $20 million. So then our $10 million ending fund balance will become negative $10 million by 26, 27. And that, puts us into a precarious situation where we are insolvent by 26, 27. The main issue is that we're deficit spending, which ultimately means we're spending more than we're bringing in. Our expenditures are higher than our revenues. We need to resolve that, balance out our revenues and expenditures, eliminate deficit spending before we could move forward and be solvent in 26, 27. So the main problem, I guess, to simplify it, is that we are deficit spending by $20 million every year, and our ending fund balance is one time in nature. So the $30 million this year looks like a lot, but when you draw that out 2 more years, you keep on eating away at your savings account, it's going to zero out in year 3, 26, 27, we'll be insolvent. And if we don't do much, if we don't do anything, we don't do any reductions, ultimately, like Eric said in his previous slide, the state takes over, we get a loan, and the choices are removed from our priorities and the state makes all the cuts for us. That's something we're going to prevent and work together to get done. But hopefully that helps kind of explain why our reserves look large right now. But when you pull that out 2 subsequent years, it runs into the negative by 26, 27.
Thanks, James. I really am not specifically talking about the reserves. I'm specifically talking about the line items that are called declining enrollment, and that we have tens of millions of dollars showing that that's what we're going to spend. And we did last year as well, but we didn't spend it. So I'm wondering how it's getting coded there and where we can actually see the district estimating that they're going to be spending beyond, because otherwise we're making cuts on services so that we can keep a line item called declining enrollment. And it feels like double counting.
I see what you're saying. So in Fund 17 is our 3% reserves. And in Fund 17, we're ultimately that should be about 3%, but 3% will always kind of fluctuate based on how much we're spending. And so we have the 3% under our reserves in Fund 17 and a little bit of cushion in case that 3% goes over or under, in order to continue to keep that 3% in Fund 17. So it might be a good conversation if we want to go into the weeds on outside of this, is to really look at Fund 17 and show kind of how we have assigned some of those dollars. In Fund 17, one thing that we were looking at was we need the 3% reserves, but also at the time we were declining enrollment, and we're projecting to continue to decline in enrollment. So as we decline in enrollment, revenues are lost because our funding is based on enrollment and attendance. So as we lose students, we lose revenue. So hopefully some of those dollars that are set aside help with that deficit spending that's caused by revenue loss. But ultimately, what declining enrollment really comes down to is deficit spending. Deficit spending is caused by declining enrollment. It's caused by over expenditures, increase in expenditures. So I think when we were naming that line item, we may have not have chosen the best name for it. I think a better name for it would just simply put deficit spending. That line item should just be known as deficit spending. And I think for first interim, what we'll do to clarify, we'll change the line item to just say for deficit spending, because we're deficit spending by 20 million, regardless if it's for revenues, regardless if it's for declining enrollment, expenditures, it's just deficit spending at the end of the day. And that's what that line item is for.
All right, thank you. We have 4 minutes left and 3 questions, so we're going to try to get through them real quick. Michelle, you're next, and Zamil, you're on deck.
I have quite a few questions, but briefly, what I'm going to ask is, as SEIU rep, we started off with 300 slides. You culled it down to 100, 106 or whatever. Can the bargaining groups look at what the other slides were? Because they may be able to tell you a little bit more about their specific, and I'm not saying I want to look at all 300. Look at what would affect my bargaining unit. What would the teachers affect their teaching unit type thing? And see if there's other ways to deal with the scenarios, because the one that popped up for me was slide 68, supply clerk. I would be a supply clerk. One of the scenarios is that you get rid of the supply clerks, give it to a different bargaining unit for someone else to take over that job. I think those things need to be talked about with the bargaining units before we go with the board any further, because you may run into a major roadblock or find avenues that are opened up that you didn't realize that are there, that things could be reduced without hurting people.
Yeah, so about like other slides, there isn't any idea that was on a slide that isn't here. Usually what it was is it's like taking 2 slides and it's like they're kind of saying the same thing. Let's put these 2 together. So there's no like slides on the cutting room floor that aren't the ideas in here. And remember that the presentation of these scenarios is literally like, this is how much we spend. This is how much you'd save if. Right? It's not saying we suggest that you do this. It's just simply saying if you were to reduce something by 0.5 FTE, this would be the impact on the budget. So there aren't any ideas that got cut off. And so if there is an idea that you have that isn't represented in here, or I wouldn't even say an idea, if there's like a scenario where it's like, we could do this, we could do this, we could do this, or we could do this, and you want to add that next bullet, definitely like you know how to get a hold of me, call me, let's talk. We can certainly add things to the list in terms of scenarios. And as far as negotiating impact and whether or not this is possible, we're not saying that all of these things are possible. We're just saying what the impact would be on the finances if you were to do something related to this. But we fully recognize that there are several things on this list that would require us to negotiate with our negotiating partners, either on whether or not it can be done or what the impacts would be if the board moved forward in doing it. So yeah, the lines of communication are always open. If there is a scenario idea on here that we haven't put, I know the board would be willing and interested in any and all creative ideas.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Zamil, you're up, and then Arnav, you're gonna be last.
Yeah, quick question. Sorry. So, are there plans to create protections for schools in terms of underfunded areas, such as caps on staff reductions or program eliminations, just in terms of the program protections?
That would be up to the board, and they have not shared any protection guidelines at this point in time. But if they did, then we would apply whatever the board directed us to do.
Yeah, thank you.
Arnav?
My question was about reclaiming Ohlone reimbursement for sections. So I know that in Mission San Jose, they're planning on replacing like classes like AP Calc BC and AP Chem with Ohlone college classes. So is that something that the district thinks that they should implement all throughout FUSC? That way they can claim money from Ohlone for classes that already exist?
That particular slide is not really, I mean, it's sort of just shifting who gets the money. Right now, the district pays for the FTE and the school gets reimbursed for a district expense. We've been letting the schools keep the money. Since we're paying for the FTE, it could go back into the general fund as opposed to going into the site coffers. I would say my priority always and every day is for an FUSD staff member to teach our classes. So I wouldn't be in a position to promote that we should, not be giving classes to our fully credentialed K-12 teachers. I think in the cases that you're talking about, these are very specialized courses that oftentimes are only taught at the college level. And so it makes sense to offer them in that way. And I would say when it makes sense, yeah, sure, let's do it. But I don't see it as a money-making venture or an opportunity to save money. It really is just a matter of there's about $150,000 right now that probably should be going to the district as opposed to going to the sites to sort of fill in the cost of the FTE that Ohlone is using. And that's what that slide is about. Okay. All right. Well, that brings us to 5 o'clock. I want to thank everybody for your time. We are going to be presenting the first interim budget on December 18th. If you have any questions about sort of the assumptions that we use or whatever, I would encourage you to log on to that meeting. We may even have, I don't know, I'd have to check with Patty. We may even have a budget advisory meeting prior to that. If we do, we will give you a heads up as to the assumptions that we're using for first interim at that time. If we had time, we were going to do it today, but it's not really that important. We were just going to sort of share with you sort of how first interim budgets are made. It's sort of like if you watch that Discovery Channel show, How It's Made, it was kind of like going to be a very mini How It's Made on the first interim. So lots more opportunities to engage on the first interim. December 18th is when the board will get it if that's of interest to you. I really want to thank everybody for your time, for your understanding. I want to let you know that this is a hard time for everybody and we recognize it, and we're not trying to minimize the emotions that are behind these slides, while at the same time we do have a job to do to try to explain, to try to be transparent, to try to really give people a feel for what $34 million actually is. We appreciate your time and attention and approach you with the seriousness that this whole topic requires. Have a good evening, everybody.
Thank you.